Hi everyone. Today I'm going to take you through the new provisions under Section 74A of the GST Act, which has been introduced to replace the existing provisions of Section 73 and Section 74. I'm CA Gilla Praveen Kumar, Chartered Accountant. I'm going to take you through the provisions and nuances of this new provision under Section 74A. I'm going to brief you the comparison of existing provisions under 73-74 vis-a-vis the new provision 74A. In the process of understanding section 74A, I'm going to talk to you how do we validate these notices or intimations which have been issued by the GST proper officer for the tax period on or after April 2024 onwards. I also will make you understand on this evaluation of the process of elements called fraud, suppression, willful misstatement, which are the allegations brought on the GST notices issued. I also will take you through the proper plan of action which is required when we prepare our reply on these draft GST notices or intimations. How a professional should respond while answering these particular documents. And finally, what would be the best practices I'll try to take you through in today's presentation. So comparison of the existing provisions under section 73-74 vis-a-vis the new provision 74A. To understand first and foremost the operational period. For the tax period ending on 31st March 2024, provisions of section 73 and 74 are relevant. For any tax period which commences from April 2024, that is from 1st April 24, provisions of 74A are going to be in existence. So any tax period which notice has been issued from April 24, please keep in mind only 74A is relevant for us. Purpose and demand of these provisions, section 73, for notices which are generally issued where tax is demanded other than existence of elements of fraud, suppression, willful misstatement. For section 74, the cases where proper officer believes that the taxpayer has not paid the tax on account of fraud, suppression or willful misstatement. When we look at section 74A, this is a culmination of both existing provisions of 73 and 74. That means to say the proper officer is going to use this mechanism of 74A for the tax demand normal cases or cases involving fraud, suppression, willful misstatement. Now, the time limit for issuance of a show cause notice generally is tagged or linked with a annual return which is filed under section 44. So usually for any particular tax period, that is probably month or clubbing of tax periods for a particular financial year. The general practice under the GST law or the taxation in general is they try to cover a particular tax period or bunch of tax periods for a particular financial year. So whenever we refer to the time limit, please keep in mind the due date for filing annual return for a particular financial year is relevant for the show cause notice. So under section 73, with on or before 33 months from the relevant date of annual return, the show cause notice has to be issued. Under section 74, the time limit for the proper officer is 54 months. For new provision 74A, the time limit has been brought in between the 73-74, which is for 42 months. Technically, it is 3.5 years from the due date of filing annual return. So for a moment, let's assume that the due date for financial year 24-25, the annual return has to be filed on or before 31st December 2025. So any notice to be issued under 74A, the time limit of the 42 months shall be calculated from 1st Jan 2026 onwards. So friends, please keep in mind this new section 74A, the notice time limit is 42 months from the due date of filing annual return. Similarly, the penal provisions. Under Section 73, the amount of penalty has been capped at 10% of the tax due or 10,000, whichever is higher. For the purpose of Section 74, the time limit, the penalty is capped at 100% of the tax amount involved. In case of Section 74A, this is a combination of Section 73 and Section 74. That means to say, in cases where the tax is demanded on account of fraud, suppression, willful misstatement, the penalty shall be equivalent to the tax evasion. In normal cases, it shall be either 10% of the tax amount or 10,000, whichever is higher. Time limit to pass an order. Now, this is a crucial point where majority of the cases we used to have no fight with the proper officer that the orders are not being passed or it is time barred. Under erstwhile Section 73, the time limit was given is 3 years from the due date of filing annual return. For 74, 5 years is the order line from the due date of filing of annual return. But the new provision 74A says that whatever be the time limit for issuance of a show cause notice, that means when a notice has been issued under 74A, from there, within 12 months, an order has to be passed. I repeat, assuming for a moment for financial year 24-25, the show cause notice was issued on, say, June 2025. So, officer under GST law has to pass an order within 12 months. That is, on or before June 2026, the order has to be passed. The government has given extension of 6 months, stating that on extraneous reasons, where the proper officer was not in a position to pass the order within 12 months, for the reasons to be recorded in writing, the time limit can be extended for further period of 6 months, not beyond that period of 6 months. So, friends, keep in mind the time limit under Section 74E to pass an order is 12 months. Moving further. Impact of this Section 74E compared to the existing provisions of 73 and 74. From taxpayers' perspective, this is a welcome move for the reason normal period for regular or scrupulous activity. Generally, it is a practice at the department that cases involving fraud, suppression, willful misstatement, we call that as an extended period. So what the department used to generally do is they have to issue a particular notice within the normal period. In case if there is any malified intent, they invoke something called extended period. Going forward from April 24 onwards, it could be a normal case or could be a scrupulous case. The proper officer has got standard time limit of 42 months for issuing a show cause notice. This is a welcome move. Earlier, we used to get a notice even after the normal period of 3 years. They try to invoke fraud, suppression, willful misstatement for the sake of issuing a notice. Now, government, the proper officer doesn't have that particular window. From the department point of view, what is the advantage they have got? For the normal cases where generally they have a time limit of 33 months, now they have got additional 18 months under this 74E. Earlier disposal of matters used to be undertaken for fraudulent activities, etc. They have a very bigger period. Now the time limit has been condensed for them to conclude within a span of 42 months. So no, they don't have that lethargic time period. Whatever fraud suppression cases are there, they have to conclude much in advance. Moving further, validation of notices issued for tax period for the period April 2024 onwards. What is that we have to do? Any document which could be a DRC-01A or DRC-01 or any intimation which is given with the proper officer. First and foremost, please check, does this particular document has mention of section 73, 74 or 74A? By chance, if the proper officer has issued a notice for the period April 24 onwards under erstwhile 73, 74, please tell them that, boss, this is not a proper notice, not a proper communication, because It is not having authority. Once the provisions under GST law have sunset clause that this has to be issued only till 31st March 2024, the proper officer doesn't have any mechanism to issue a notice under erstwhile law. So as a taxpayer, what should I do? You have a provision under section 160 where we can challenge the particular correspondence what was received. So usually what we will do is we will keep silent on those particular notices. So my suggestion would be invoke the provisions which are there under section 160 where you will tell the proper officer saying that, my dear proper officer, your document which has been issued is invalid because you don't have a proper authority. So let us respond to the offer of proper officer that this has been issued without authority. Thereby I'm not bound to respond to any of your questions thereupon. If you don't respond, that may be not proper. Rather, you respond not to detail on his observation. Rather, you bring to his knowledge that this lacks authority under section 73 or 74 for the period April 24 onwards. Next, assessment of the elements of fraud, suppression, etc. in a notice which has been given. My advice is, please read the explanation which was given under section 74A, which has detailed what do we understand by the term called suppression. Just for your understanding purpose, this term suppression is very, very clear, saying that whenever a proceedings are initiated on a taxpayer, it is a burden, it is a onus on the proper officer to prove that there exists an intent to avoid payment of tax. So this burden is on the proper officer. So whenever this is suppression, they have to detail to us what is the information which has to be mentioned in a written or probably information or a statement which the assessee, the taxpayer has furnished, which is not proper. So here, this explanation clearly says that non-declaration of facts or information. So what is that fact? As a taxpayer, I've kept away from the GST authorities. To give an example, let me say that I'm a builder. The fact that as a builder I may undertake a project which could be say project which is for residential REP or RREP. Now when I undertake a particular project of REP or RREP, I should ensure that all my inward supplies are from registered suppliers. If I fail to no, reverse my sorry no, I have to pay tax under reverse charge mechanism if my inward supplies are not covered under the given threshold limit of 80%. This is one information. Second information, assuming I undertake projects with input tax credit, projects without input tax credit. Application of Rule 42 is something which I have to adopt, and every tax period when I file my return, I have to reverse my input tax credit by application of Rule 42. Now, knowing that I'm a builder, knowing that the fact that I'm eligible for input tax credit on only some of the projects, if I don't disclose that information, probably that could be a suppression. Right? This is where we need to understand how the proper officer has a reason to believe that I as a taxpayer have suppressed some information. Please keep in mind, the burden is on the proper officer, the onus is on the proper officer. So whenever he gives a notice, whether he brought this fact that there is a suppression, there is a fraud, there is a misstatement, these three elements have to be properly understood, and then we need to make our defense for making a proper response to that. So whenever I talk about fraud, willful misstatement, please keep in mind this existence of fraud or willful misstatement should be available with the proper officer, which he has mentioned in this notice. Like, to give one more example with respect to say fraud, the taxpayer has registered and paid taxes say from June 2025 onwards. Whereas the income tax return filed by that particular taxpayer indicates that he's already crossed the threshold limit for the previous year, and the nature of business activity for the previous year, for current year, all remains same, status quo. So in this case, where the taxpayer is ought to be registered but not registered, there is no change in the business activity. Where he has failed to get himself registered, that could be an example where there is an intent to evade payment of tax. So these are the finer elements which we need to properly understand before making a response to the notice. Now, what are the appropriate plan of action we have to take or keep in mind when we make our response to these notices? Point number one, ascertain the reason for issuance of the intimation or a notice which was issued by the proper officer. Means what grounds were relied upon for issuing that particular document. Like example, there was a gap in input tax credit avail. When I say gap, input tax credit available in form GSTR 2B vis-a-vis input tax credit available in GSTR 3B, where we need to understand when I have taken more than the credit avail, probably we would have workings made readily with us in our file. So try to understand his query, prepare your response and file a response to that instantly to the proper officer. Similarly, short payment of tax. There is a reason to believe that taxes ought to be paid but not paid. So read, understand, evaluate, then prepare your workings before you respond to that particular observation. Examine the source of inputs relied upon by the proper officer. This is very, very crucial for us before we make our reply. The source of information, please keep in mind, there are information which are made publicly available. Like example, Form 26 is which is from the Income Tax Division. Your IT return file again available with the Income Tax Department. GSTR 7, GSTR 6, where TCS or TDS which was deducted on behalf of the taxpayer. So whatever information the proper officer believes that it is available with him, evaluate that particular information and then keep that particular information no like examine. The inputs which have received, the inputs which have been received should be understood, should be validated for its completeness, and then your reconciliation has to be intact for preparing your detailed reply. Then validation of violations in specific with the intent of GST provisions. Please keep in mind that whenever a proper officer has brought an observation, it is the duty of the proper officer to say that what is that we have violated. For an example, there is a gap of input tax credit available vis-a-vis input tax available to a taxpayer. So when I have violated, the proper officer has to mention there is a violation of section 16(2) clause A or AA or clause C. Proper officer in general cannot say that there is a violation of the provisions of section 16, so you pay that input tax. No, it is not accepted. Reason, section 16 has got subsection 2, subsection 2 has got further clause A, B, C, D. So the officer has to make you understand that particular specific provision you have violated. Then on the basis of that, we have to read that particular specific GST section or rule and then prepare our defense. Again, suppose if the officer says, say you have to pay interest but you have not paid. Now interest has to be paid under section 50, subsection 1 or subsection 2 or subsection 3. He has to detail the specific provision which you need to understand and prepare your detailed reply. Collate your submissions, justification, documentation to strengthen your argument. Whenever you prepare your reply, please keep in mind, you read your observation of the officer, you read the specific the section or rule, and then you started explaining the response. In the process of doing so, you take out the working, the supporting invoice, debit note, credit note, the document which will demonstrate to the officer to understand your response. Last but not the least, read the instructions, read the circulars which are issued by the CBIC before you conclude your submissions. Usually, this should be the first paragraph of your submission. To give an example, so in 2023, there was one instruction which was issued by CBIC in relation to the notices which are issued under Section 61. We have a form called ASMT 10. So whenever a proper officer issues this ASMT 10, the CBIC instruction is very clear that that particular ASMT 10 should be made available on common portal. The reply to be made by the taxpayer in ASMT 11 will also be online. So in case if the ASM 10 was issued manually, you have to respond to them. Boss, you as a proper officer, there was an instruction given to you where it should be made available online. Without making available online, how do you expect me to respond to this online? So that should be the first line of defense. So what you have to do is circulars instructions given by CBIC, if available for this particular context, read them and then adopt as a proper defense in the opening arguments. The industry best practices, what I recommend you have to keep in mind, first and foremost, prevention is better than cure. See to that you try to avoid differences, gaps in your returns. I understand that gap in input tax avail vis-a-vis input tax available, that is not in your control. Because of the timing gap or because of some reasons you don't avail the auto-populate ITC in the same month. You keep a track of this ITC, kept on hold in table 4B2 vis-a-vis subsequent availment and detail mention in 4D1. This particular practice will help you to give a proper justification to the proper officer. Evaluate the intimation or notice before responding. Never ever be in a hurry to jump in responding to a notice. Evaluation. Was that notice given to me? Was that notice relevant for me? Was that notice given by an officer who is having authority to give that particular notice? For a moment, a notice was given by an officer who is not under my jurisdiction. If you read the GST provisions, there is one provision under which who they have defined who is a proper officer for issuance of a show cause notice, for passing an order, for conducting summons. So evaluate those powers which were given, and also please keep in mind for a particular notice, superintendent, assistant commissioner, deputy commissioner, joint commissioner, they have been given with some monetary powers. Only those officers are empowered to give those kind of notices. So read, examine, and then respond to those notices. Follow the CPC instructions, circulars, which are very, very clear. What should be the plan of action to be made by the proper officer before issuing a notice. Dealing the response with proper explanation and documentation. Give utmost care with respect to detailing, in the sense what the proper officer noted, what happened, what document you have, what was the gap, whether it was a clerical error at the proper officer end. Like one example, when you look at GSTR1, in GSTR1 there is a table called table 12A, 12B towards advances received, advances adjusted. Most of the times we come across the notices issued without even reading the advances which are reported, advances which are adjusted. Blindly the proper officer compares GST 1 and 3B and the issue notice. So make them aware, make them educated that boss, you have not read the information which was fed by me in my GSTR 1. Respond in timely manner for notices without any negligence. Please don't keep the notices under the carpet. Wait for a proper auspicious day to respond to them to the proper officer. give the response well ahead of the time which was indicated. This will help you to avoid litigation in due course of time. And friends, this is my email ID. You have any suggestions and feedback to be on the topic which I've covered, or any items, any topics which you want me to detail further, please drop in an email. I'll be happy to respond to you. Thank you for your patience listening.